you in fact, you're running to replace Scott Jones. We're going to talk about that and what's going on locally. I think the most important question this morning on this show is, do you have your tonsils?
Yeah. You know what? I was on the way here. I was listening to that, and I go, I think I might be in the minority. I do not.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, all right.
Cool.
So,
You have someone.
Yes.
Yeah, so you were saying tonsil people unite.
Yes, and now exactly. You and I.
Yeah. Now you two are there.
We're on the same team.
It's okay. We accept you.
Yeah, it's fine.
So
we're inclusive.
Let's just kind of in general. What do you still get out? Do you still get out and cop at all, or do you have to hear from the boys and girls?
I'll tell you, I lean on the officers doing the job because it's a young person's game, as I say. I have dabbled and got into a vehicle one time, and it started to occur to me how out of place I was, not being trained with all the new weapons as far as less lethal and all that. I started realizing how dangerous I could be because of the fact that all I had to do was respond. Not to mention I was lost everywhere I went.
Officer Pat Patterson, who's our security chief, and goes in and out of working with the department. We bowl together, and over the last few years, as it became time to do the pig bowl, when he was still playing and he was training, he would show up at bowling limping, and I'm like, Pat, you have to chase guys half your age, and he's like, and he said the same thing. It's a young man's game. But what's it like in general? What do you like? I just noticed last night there was an abortion rights protest in downtown Los Angeles. It escalated into a clash with law enforcement. Crowd of about 250 people that start throwing objects at the officers. What's the mood out there? You guys are there. You're trying to just keep the peace, and now you're getting stuff thrown at you because they don't like the abortion decision or whatever reason they're out there.
Well, it's a difficult place to be. I mean, we saw it over the last 2 years in downtown, and we're there to protect the rights of those and their constitutional rights of protest. But when it starts turning into vandalism and destruction, that is where we have to intervene. And then, unfortunately, sometimes those efforts are turned towards the law enforcement personnel. So it's difficult because they're there to protect not only the property, the peace, but also the people that are trying to peacefully protest.
So are you what we used to call back in the 90s when Rudy Giuliani, when he was Rudy Giuliani, was mayor of New York, are you a broken windows guy? The arrest, which I don't know if you want to explain what that is first, but it's basically stop the small crimes first before they escalate. No,
absolutely. You take care of the little things, they won't turn into big things. And I think we've seen around our region with the efforts and the decriminalization of certain laws, we're seeing more crime, we're seeing more blight issues, and law enforcement is kind of their handcuffed, so to speak, pardon the pun, but the reality is there's only so much we can do within the policy and the law, and that is our job, is to enforce the law.
And that, what can you do? I mean, because if they're not going to prosecute, I hear stories from around the country from various cops that say, well, we don't even bother to arrest them because they're not going to prosecute. So, I mean, does it get that far?
Well, no, I mean, that's the great part about the sheriff's office is if someone's breaking the law, you're going to be held accountable, and then it's not for us to decide whether it's going to be prosecuted. We show up, we do our job as called by the citizens, and if there's a crime that's occurred and we have someone there that's responsible for it, we do our job, whether it's a citation or take him to the jail, and then it's up to the prosecution to decide what happens from there.
I do love when you say enforce the law, because that's something where I really feel for you guys, of when people will get so upset at you, guys and gals. It's funny because commercial break we were talking about different sexism in industries, in the older days. Don't want to forget the women doing this either, but. And people forget you're enforcing a law that's already put in place. It's not like you just made it up, and you're there to just cause them grief or trouble. Yeah. And I just feel for you guys sometimes when people are getting mad at you for just doing your job, enforcing a particular law.
Yeah, absolutely. When Prop 47 passed, it was interesting. I was working that night as a watch commander. It was turning into January 1st, and the new law changed, and we had an officer who actually contacted someone with heroin, which was a felony, on December 31st. But January 1st, it turned into a misdemeanor citation. And the individual, and just hearing that interaction for the officer to have to really grasp what is happening, and then the community to understand how those laws impact what we can and cannot do.
Well, and those specific to California propositions, one of the demoralizing things for a lot of citizens was those were voted in by citizens. Yes. This is not overzealous politicians who have a different agenda. But what does that do? And what you were describing earlier, where, we're out there as the sheriffs and we're arresting people and they're not getting prosecuted. Does that play a role in morale?
It does. When you start looking at the industry, when I teach classes, I talk to officers and I tell them, I say, who in here has children? They raise their hands. I go, having your hands in there, who would encourage your children to come on the job today? And a lot of hands drop because of what's happening with policies and the laws that are changing, because they feel sometimes ineffective. There's still a ton of support, especially in the Sacramento region, for law enforcement. You usually hear it when you're in a coffee shop or you're eating, and someone will come over and whisper in your ear, "Hey, thank you for your service." You know,
But it's sad they have to whisper.
Yes.
I know, like shout it proud.
Yeah, it used to be you bought them lunch.
Agreed.
Which I'm sure you encourage that still. So Sacramento County is going to get a new sheriff for the first time since 2010, because Scott Jones is running for House of Representatives. Yeah. And we're going to get a new district attorney for the first time since 2014. Do you have a horse in that race? Because you work closely with the DA if you're going to be the sheriff.
Well, the one I work with closely is Ten Ho. I have throughout my career in homicide. When I worked homicide, he was a homicide prosecutor. As a supervisor of homicide, we had many cases. And he, as you know, he was the prosecutor of the Golden State Killer. Well, when I was a supervisor in homicide, I led that investigation with the detectives for a while. And, you know, I was the one who actually told Ten Ho the story about the Golden State Killer while we were working another homicide case.
Wow.
And he said, well, if you ever catch that person, I want to prosecute. And lo and behold, you know, as I had promoted and moved on out of the unit, they were able to find him and make the arrest. And Ten Ho was the lead prosecutor.
Wow.
Is it true that that son of a bitch said, "I have a roast in the oven"?
It is alleged that upon contact, I was
he
not
said,
there.
"I have
cannot
a roast
confirm
in the
or
oven."
deny. Yes.
Wow.
Jeez.
You've been involved in a couple of the high profile cases in our area, because you were honored way back in the 90s when you were on the streets with a big high profile case locally.
Well, it was. Well, I would say locally, as far as when I was a homicide, or actually I was a sex assault investigator, I was attached to a cold case unit. And at the time I had the oldest cold case solved in Sacramento County history, which is a 35-year-old case. And it was interesting because the case was actually occurred 2 months before I was born. And
Wow.
And when I was looking at the investigation and looking at, you know, the investigators at the time were on the right leads. They had the right people. We just were able to finally use DNA technology to find out who was responsible. But this person was living their life in Florida, a whole separate life, and we show up and knocked on their door, and it was a great for the family. And how we found, I'll tell you a real quick tidbit on that one.
That's great.
So when we started that investigation, we're going through our local databases trying to find the family members. Well, back in the 70s, you know, it was just as we talked about, it was a Mr. So-and-so it was Mr. Jim Barnes and Miss Barnes. It was listed.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
when we're trying to find the relatives of the decedent, I started looking at it. It was like nationwide database search, thousands and thousands of people. And I said, well, I was getting late in the day. I go, well, I'll check California. There was still thousands. I go, well, I'll check locally. And I found someone that was in Folsom, which was on my way home. And I started driving. As I was going down the Folsom corridor, I stopped by, left my card, nobody was there, and I get 20 minutes down the road and I get a phone call. I just found this business card on my door. I said, well, I wanted to talk to you. And she goes, are my kids okay? I said, yes. I'm actually looking at, I said, you know, I'm looking into a case. It's an older case from 1972. And she goes, oh my God, my sister Shannon.
What?
And it was her.
Oh my God. Oh.
And it was the first person, the first time I happened to just go look, and we made the connection. And to be able to, I turned around actually to call my wife, and I said, hey, I'm not going to be home for dinner. Went back, and we spent hours of her just telling me about her sister and upbringing, what they knew about the case. And lo and behold, we were able to bring it to a successful prosecution and bring closure to that family.
Oh, that's so beautiful for them.
So the election is June 7th.
Yes.
When does earlier voting or mail voting begin?
Mail ballots drop May 9th, and that's something about this election is there's only two of us in the race, so it is over on June 7th, which is 34 days away.
So how long have you been a cop?
24 years.
All with Sac Sheriff?
Yes.
Did you love it? Do you love it?
I love it. I would never change a thing.
So after this long, and you shared with me, your wife was in law enforcement,
Yes.
and she just retired, I think.
She did.
Why are you doing this?
I don't know. She asked me the same thing. The only thing I told her, because she's a brilliant woman who navigated a male-dominated profession, and I was her biggest fan, still am.
Hell yeah.
And, you know, she was one of 32 assistant chiefs in a highway patrol of 11,000 employees, and watching her navigate that and excel, it's admirable. The only thing I did is I made her sign a document that she wouldn't run against me. Because she can hold a room and is more intelligent than I am, but she's beautiful and powerful, and she's going to continue in her next chapter and dominating in life.
That's amazing.
So why don't you join her? Why don't you retire too?
I don't. There's something I will tell you. I went through some dark days when I worked in. Law enforcement can change you. The things you see you can't unsee. And it started a long time ago, and then went into when I was working homicide, and saw over 300 dead bodies and did more death notifications than I care to admit. And I went to a dark space, and I did. And I remember my wife. She saved my life. I'm a firm believer in that, and she encouraged me to go get the help I needed, which I did. And then I got my faith journey in line, and it was at that moment, it was like I quit living for me and started living for my purpose. And so,
love that.
when we were downtown at the protest, my wife was downtown helping keep the Capitol safe. I was keeping the main jail and the district attorney's office safe. And one night we got home and we're watching. It was about 2 a.m. And it was a funny story attached to that. I cooked a tri-tip because I didn't want to lose it. Been marinating for 3 days. And it was a 9-day stretch. And so she ended up, we're eating, and she was giving me a hard time about eating at 2 a.m. But we looked at the TV, and she goes, just looking at chaos across the nation. She goes, do you want this at our doorstep? And I said, no, ma'am, but somebody's got to lead us out of this mess.
Yeah.
And she, at that point in time, she goes, I'll support you. And, we'll be married 20 years in July. And, we've been battle tested as loved ones, but her support, that's all I needed. And right then I was all in.
I love that.
Honestly, it is really incredible to hear that you work to stop and prosecute sex crime. You respect women. You hype up your wife. Dude, you are a badass.
Yeah.
I know I should have brought her here. We would have got into a debate, but she would win.
No, like, this is so cool to know that you're going for something that will affect all of our lives as Sacramentans. And you're so forward thinking, and you have such respect. It's cool.
I appreciate
So
that.
we see her, if you pay attention to the news, some news sources, we see around the country, big city crime is nuts. Sacramento, you're obviously not city, you're county. Sacramento is, depending on how you rank it, it's the 19th or the 25th biggest city in the country. It's a big city. A lot of us don't realize or remember because everything New York, LA, Chicago.
Yeah.
How is it? How's the crime? How's the overall environment in terms of not so much people getting prosecuted, although I know they're connected, but what's it? Is it bleeding in?
Well, we have a dip in certain crime areas, but then there's an increase in others. And, just in Sacramento region alone, we've had 16 homicides in April alone.
Wow.
And so is it
What's the
bleeding over?
average?
Ooh, I wouldn't know the average.
But that's
of
a
April.
lot.
It is significant for a month of, in 1 month.
gosh.
So, when we look at that, how does that impact us? And I think a lot of it is just a culmination of a lot of factors. Zero bail, early release, no accountability. People are coming out back in the streets where they feel brazen enough to, what happened downtown, pull a firearm out, multiple firearms out, and just start shooting at each other in crowds of people, not worrying about the repercussions from it. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you this so many times. What can you do about it as the sheriff?
Well, I'll tell you what we are doing.
Because a lot of what you described there is out of your hands, seems to me.
Yeah, so we're bound by the laws that are on the books. We'll continue to encourage our lawmakers to make sound decisions and educate the public when propositions do come up, and it might be mislabeled as far as safety when we really know that it's going to tear at the fabric of safety.
Yeah.
But I will tell you what we're doing right now is it's kind of unique to the area. Some agencies are doing it, but we're working with community-based organizations now to really attack some of the societal issues before they turn into high crime problems.
Perfect.
And utilizing these community-based organizations, and we identify an area that might be a significant crime, maybe lower level crime, but we will ask them, hey, what can you do? Then we get into faith-based organizations. What can you do? Then the county-based organizations from DHA, DHS, what can you do to assist? And we're the last ones in the door. If you look at Dallas PD, we have a mutual friend, but the chief of police, Eddie Garcia, that's there from San Jose. He took the model that we're moving towards and partnered with the university and actually looked at statistics, found apartment complexes were really some of the issues on the lower level crime, but it was a strain on resources. Utilized this approach. And he was published, I think, in the New York Times about crime is going down there. And we've been moving towards that for the past 2 years, and we're going to continue to do that.
So you've been Undersheriff under Scott Jones for how long?
Well, actually appointed as Undersheriff since early March.
And has Scott gone on the record as whether or not he supports you as his successor?
He has. He's endorsed
Oh,
me.
yay.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool.
No, I
Scott's
appreciate it.
he's a friend of the show. He's been on. You are running against your opponent, who obviously, if they ask for equal time, we will give it to them.
Correct.
But do you want to take some time to attack him, or?
I will tell you this. Him and I met. He was good. He was good to me in the organization. But I told him I'm going to stay above the line. That's where I choose to stay. But I ask people to fact check everything. There's things to look at as far as ways that's voted, has not voted. He's the co-author of SB 54 Sanctuary Cities, which has actually caused some of the challenges here. Even recently, the church shooting that we had with the 3 young girls. and the innocent bystander. And at no time has that bill been brought back to say, how do we relook at this? We look at the death and destruction happened in San Francisco because of this, the continued crime wave because of this. And again, these bills, when they're passed, if you maybe good faith in the beginning, but when you realize, hey, this is probably not the best, we should be coming back to the table. And that's the problem. Everybody's playing partisan politics and nobody wants to communicate and work together with it. And that's, for me, is where I take my pride, is I'm good at bringing people together, working through issues, because I don't have an ego. Let's leave it at the door. It's about the goal, not the role we play in it. But when people are dying and there's destruction and it's not being brought back to take a look at how we rewrite this to make communities safer, that's a problem.
I was telling you during the break before we went on that I vetted you as best I could, talked to a lot of my cop friends in and out of the sheriff's office, and many of them said that they would be okay with your opponent winning, but I couldn't find any of them that didn't love you, describe you as a cop's cop. And one of the things one of them said to me was that the difference between you and your opponent is, while your opponent has a history in law enforcement, you're still doing it.
Yes.
You've never left it, whereas he became an assemblyman for a while. Is that something that you tout as well? Is it because there's an argument to be made, actually somebody from the outside should come in,
right.
And then there's the argument that says, yeah, but I'm institutional, I know what I'm doing.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this. We don't need 30-year-old policing techniques in modern-day policing and where we are now. And I've navigated it for 24 years. I've worked every level in this organization, from the entry-level deputy to detective, sergeant, commander, chief deputy, and now undersheriff. And it is important to be in tune and having those relationships, because as my opponent talks about what he's going to do, I'm already doing all that. I've worked for 4 sheriffs. I've taken what qualities that I've liked from each 4 of them. But I'm me. I'm my own person. I don't need to take credit for things. And that for me is what I have, is you don't forget where you come from. You don't outgrow your assignment in your own head, and you do the work for the right reasons without looking for credit, and you're going to do good things. And that, for me and myself, is how I've been able to excel.
For me personally, as I'm listening to this, the thing that I like is that you're still in it. So whatever laws get passed, you actually know and see, and you're in the trenches of how it affects it. If you're just the person helping pass it and then you just go about your day, you have no idea how it's really, you're not in it anymore. So you don't know how it's actually affecting things, and maybe how it made it worse instead of better. Yeah.
We're with Undersheriff Jim Barnes of the Sacramento Sheriff's Office. You've worked under 4 sheriffs, so there's Jones, McGinnis.
Yes.
And who are the others?
Lou Blanis and Glenn Craig is the first one who hired me.
God, you've been here as long as we have.
That's
you're old.
Yeah.
We're all old.
We're all old.
Yeah. It's interesting. I still do go out and grab a squad car, and I have gone out into work, and I usually show up after the officers have gotten there to make sure everything's safe, but just to check on them. But yeah, it's getting in and out of the car is a young person's game.
We got some emails that we've been encouraging people to send in questions and such. RAD@radradio.com. Of course, you can call as well. 888-989-9811. Courtney just wrote in, said, going off of Undersheriff Barnes' comment about people saying they would not want their children to get into law enforcement, I'm from a law enforcement family. My dad worked for over 30 years for a county sheriff, retired in 2010. He loved his job. You ask him now, and he says he is so thankful to not be active law enforcement because of the cloud over it now and the new dangers he says he never faced. Is it more dangerous than ever?
Well, it is. You see it. And we have, with social media right at our fingertips, too, you're hearing about it daily when officers are being, assaulted or even assassinated. And that was unconscionable. And it still is today, but we're seeing it on a rapid pace. And, we have these younger officers coming in. And I think this is where I grow hope and faith is, we go into our academies and they're full classes.
Wow.
And there's
That's
people
good.
from the communities that still want to provide that service. And, when you look at the pension reform that changed, there's people that have to work longer with a little bit less pension. And, you wonder what motivates people. And I really say this, law enforcement is a calling. That was, for me, it wasn't what I thought I was going to ever get into. I had a rough upbringing. My dad dealt with the law enforcement, but on the wrong side of the track. So when people said, it was one of those, were you ever think about being law enforcement? I said, no. I actually got here through athletics and came up to Sacramento to play football. And then one of my friends was actually working with the sheriff's office, and I did a ride-along, and I was hooked because I'm a protector mindset, and being able to serve the community and for a calling and a purpose. There's still a lot of people who want to get into this profession, but it is challenging and navigation. When I talk about the challenges I went through, this job can change you because there's things you'll never unsee. Imagine seeing the worst of the worst in a 10-hour day and coming home to dinner, and your loved one goes, "How was your day?"
Oh, gosh.
And you tend to go, "I don't want to talk about it."
When all that's playing in your head and your mind, you got to work on getting it out of your mind. Yeah. But I feel like you're all. I put law enforcement, firefighters, EMT, military. You're all cut from that cloth of wanting to serve beyond you. Like, you want to serve. You want to help your country or community, and it seems like it most definitely would be, that's the calling. You know, you all have that special thing about yourself, where it's bigger than you.
It is, you know, and you don't do it for the accolades. That's not why we do it. It's because there are people that come up and then try and incite you and trying to make you the next viral video, and you just remain professional. And that's what I love about the sheriff's office is we have nothing but professionals that are working there, and, you know, but we have human beings providing that service. And you look at how these impacts for the things they see can't unsee. How does that manifest into challenges at home? And then so I look at it as a leader myself is we not only owe it to the officer to make sure that their health and wellness is intact, we owe it to their family, because that's the promise we made them when they were sworn in and they were excited to get their badge is you're part of our family. And so those are the steps that I'm taking, you know, right now is how do we expand that network of health and wellness for them so they can unpack it and not go 20, 25 years. Because if you look at retirement statistics, they're horrible, you know, for law enforcement. And it's the suicide rate, the addiction rate, the divorce rate has skyrocketed because of that. So I'm excited about working more on the front end so this doesn't impact them on into retirement and they're able to be retired as many years as they worked.
You mentioned going on a ride along. My uncle was a lifelong state trooper in New Jersey, so I grew up with a little bit of a law enforcement background and pro cop. But when I went on my first ride along with now Lieutenant Brian Amos, and so longtime listeners know I've talked about many ride alongs on the show. It was life altering for me. Yeah. And I've always said that if I could pass one law, it would be that every adult has to go on one ride along, just so they can experience one night out there to see what it's like, because it totally changes, which is why I try to tell the stories. Because when you're out there and you see how fast things happen, how wrong the information is, how wrong witnesses are, and you're thinking in your own head, what would I be doing right now? Are you guys, because I know COVID really screwed things up, are you guys back to doing ride-alongs, and would you encourage citizens to do them?
We are. We've actually opened it back up because we want to have the access for our public, not only to understand for those reasons of what we do, but to really hopefully recruit people that want to come into the profession. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I never got
I don't know. I don't know.
No one tried to recruit me.
No.
Well, I don't know if Brian ever did this to you, but when I would take ride-alongs, it was always interesting to watch their face when I would say, "Hey, do you want to wear a vest? I can get you one."
Ooh.
And then it was, Are you comfortable and familiar with, at the time we were using 870 Remington shotguns? They've all been now transitioned to less lethal, but I would ask them, I would say, have you ever used a firearm? And usually I'd get the yes. I said, okay, well, here's the lever to unlock this thing if you need it, if I'm fighting for my life. And they go, do you expect me to get involved? I said, no. But to look at their face of, hey, this is the reality of what the law enforcement is. You know, when we give our loved ones that hug and kiss goodbye, there is that reality. And we just, you know, 2 days ago, we just paid tribute to all the officers in California at the Peace Officer Memorial. And you look at the families, and we say never forget, but just to be able to say that, be part of an organization and law enforcement, it's prideful for me. I wouldn't change it. Even all the things I had to go through in the darkest days, I would never change a thing, because it is a noble profession, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing.
I saw footage of that, and it was just beautiful. All the people there, and they came from all over California, and just a lot of the moms that were there, you know, thinking of the other, you know, just putting themselves, they're like, we're all a family. And even though I didn't personally know, right, like they would all be telling stories, and some of the women there are widows from lost officers, and they just feel that connection to them, though, because they all are in this family.
Yeah.
And yes, I got the shotgun speech. Like almost immediately when I got into Brian's car, I got that. I got shown how, and then I was told, you never stray more than 3 feet away from me. You go wherever I go.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Phone number is 888-989-9811 with Undersheriff Jim Barnes of Sacramento Sheriff's Office. Hello, Ethan.
Hi, and Rob, I completely agree with you. Yeah, the first ride-along I did, I got completely hooked. But under Sheriff Barnes, I was wondering, I haven't been able to find out your issue or your stance on, because I know Sheriff Scott Jones really opened up the CCW to citizens in Sacramento County. The sheriff's office is actually more stringent on issuing permits and requires more classes to actually get a permit. But, I mean, are you planning to continue that? Because, with the rising crime, especially, I live in the unincorporated county, and, I mean, with the rising crimes in a lot of the areas, and, I mean, response times, I think it's a genuine concern for a lot of people to worry, well, hey, am I legally going to be able to get a permit? Because I know an instructor who instructs these classes, And, I'm worried that your opponent may try to start going toward the liberal trend, which is to limit these.
We got a lot of email questions about CCWs in general and what your position is.
No, that's a great question. That's the number one question I get when I have events or I run into people in the community. And I'm a supporter of the CCW program and the Second Amendment. I'll tell you real quick what's one of the challenges that's going on with law enforcement because of the laws. If because of Prop 47 and 57, there's decriminalization of certain crimes. If I were a drug dealer and it was a felony before, but now because of new laws says it's a misdemeanor and it's been past a certain time frame, I can go back, get my record expunged, and now those individuals are applying for CCWs.
Oh, Jesus.
And I want people to understand, remember, this is an endorsement. It's a privilege, not a right to have this. So it's important that we do vet the people that are going to be carriers. And those who are considering it, I always say, you always have to think this all the way through. Are you prepared to use it if there's a need to? Because the last thing you want to do is point that and think that's going to get everybody to comply because you don't want it turned on you. So the classes are important. The training is important. The thoughtful scenarios in your head is very important if you are currently a CCW carrier.
Yeah, and if you are pro-gun, you should be happy to have more regulations in these particular senses, just because of the fact that we won't have to hear as much about nonsensical gun control if it's applicable in situations where it matters and it can help.
I hate bad gun owners.
Yeah, they're the
They give us-
worst.
They give us such a bad name.
They are the worst.
We got a quick email from Corey, who's a member of the Sacramento Police Department. Says, I know Sheriff Barnes, his wife, and his daughter, one of the most fantastic families that I know.
Oh, that's so
Hello,
He must have got the check.
Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, Sheriff Barnes, I just want to tell you my hat's off to you. We need more people like you in our world. You're an inspiration to the younger law enforcement type people. I'm a retired correctional officer just in 2017, and the world is changing. The crimes are getting crazy. What gets me is people don't even care or know what they're doing is wrong. It's been wrong for years, but it's just so out there now. It's just, we wouldn't think about it 20, 25, 30 years ago. Now they don't care. People like you. I'm out here in Nevada, or else I'd vote for you.
Well, spread the word to your friends.
Things have gone backwards. It's like what was wrong is right now.
We got an email from Alex. He had a couple questions, but he echoed. A lot of people wrote a version of this. Do you have plans on creating, building, and or restoring trust with people of color in particular?
Yes. No, that's a great question. I think what I also pride myself on is the work that I've been doing, just not recently, but it's been throughout my career of building bridges and looking for solutions. I think, when I became the commander of North Patrol, it was 30 days later George Floyd hit. And it was one of those moments where I'd walk around and I'd hear the officers say, I don't police that way. And I said, I understand, but it's our time right now to say, help us understand what does our community need that doesn't violate the public safety, and how do we build those bridges? And that's where we started piloting in the North area with the group that works directly with the underserved communities, and they're now 2.5 years later. They're kind of our ambassadors. We just did this community academy. We just started. We haven't done it for decades, and this group is our first class going through because they bought into what we're doing and being able to utilize community-based organizations to address some of the issues. If there's a violent crime, we would go and do our job and then we leave, but that trauma is still there. And so utilizing these faith-based organizations, community-based organizations to get in there, give the wraparound services to the victims and their families.
So in order, we got the most questions. Third was relations to people of color. Second was CCW. Number one was homelessness.
Yes.
What can the sheriff's office do about it? It's out of control everywhere. We're on in Reno as well, so you got the call from Nevada. It's bad in Reno.
Right.
And whenever I go downtown a couple times a week, and then into Midtown, and then into the county, the areas that use it is bad. Yeah. The spread to the corrections officer call just in the last few years. What are you going to do? Or what can you do?
Well, and for law enforcement, right, we enforce the laws that are on the books, and we know it's not a crime to be homeless, but the issues that come with it is criminal in nature at times. There's a segment of that population that is evil. We've seen that, but there are people who do need the help. So what we've created in the sheriff's office, and when I became the commander at the branch jail, which is Rio Casuma's Correctional Center, we have a reentry programming there. And I learned that we have some of the lowest recidivism numbers in the nation. So I started looking into why is this happening? And I say the secret magic behind it is they do risk needs assessment on the offender population that's in the reentry program. And what that does, that gets to the root cause of the criminogenic behavior. So if I'm sexually assaulted as a kid, but now I'm doing drugs as an adult to mask over that, you get arrested, you go to drug diversion court, but you don't get to the issue. So now we're getting to the root cause, going to thinking for change, medical assisted treatment, whatever it may be. So when I saw these numbers as low as sometimes 12 by year 3, 12%, state average is 63 to 75%. Now, it's the amazing people in the reentry programming that's doing the work. I asked, why aren't we doing this on the front end? So we're now moving risk needs assessment. We're working with the county leadership. Everybody's on board, including the public defender's office, to how do we get people who meet the matrix, a repeat offender, a prolific offender, to get a risk needs assessment and attach some of these organizations being county-based, whether it's mental health, whether it's people experiencing homelessness, and attach them on the front end so as they're navigating the judicial system, the relationship is built, the trust is built, the program and a plan is put together so when they go out the door, they're connected to services. Now, right now, what we're doing is we're putting people out the door, and I say, we hope that they show up to their appointment, and they're not.
Yeah.
And the most dangerous thing you give someone is hope without follow-through. And so when I look at how we're doing this right now is this is working. It's still early, but we're moving it. And right now, what we've researched is we'll be the only county at the adult level doing this in the nation. And so it'll be great as we kind of be those trailblazers, work through the issues, but I think it'll have a ripple effect in our community by getting people connected to service and into transitional housing. We will see fewer homeless. So from the sheriff's office, that's how we can play a role. But we also right now partner with all our county-based partners who get into these encampments, and we're there for security and let them do the amazing work that they do.
You said something that is just so true. I've just seen it throughout the years, just doing nonprofit stuff, the follow through.
Yes.
That is, it's like sometimes people just come out for a day, right? Well, I did my part, right? Like, and then there's no, and then and you're there for that day, and everything seems so hopeful.
Yeah.
And then no one comes back, and there's no follow through, and that is like so huge. And I commend you because I've lived here my whole life basically, and I've never seen, I live in the Roseville area, but I'll go downtown sometimes. And when I was younger, we lived on D Street and downtown. And now when I drive through there to go to certain appointments, I never saw homeless ever. And there are in the neighborhood right across the street from homes, there's these tents set up. But Kinley Park, even though I lived in Placer County, I would drive there to run because I loved running around that park, and never in those days when I did that, was there any, it wasn't even a park homeless people went to. Right. And now just everywhere. And you're like, well, gosh, is this the person that has a job, they just can't afford housing, or is this someone causing trouble? And I really feel for you guys because it's such a complicated issue.
Right. Well, it is. And you look at the cause, a lot of it is you see, especially the ones that you see, screaming on the streets, it's through drug psychosis, and it's created those mental health issues. And so how do you get to, when they're in a public place, they're homeless, they're abusing drugs, and we have no mechanism to get them the help if they don't want the help. And some say 1,000 contacts, you might be able to get some help, but we're seeing it just spread and grow. And that's why I think working with our county partners that we're doing right now and continue to be, how do we fit into this space and help out? It's safety and security. But when it comes to bringing the other organizations together to say, let's identify this and address this, throwing money at these issues is not the solve. It's been proven that, you throw billions of dollars at it and say nothing's changed. Well, because we haven't really sat down, got the egos out the door, not worried about who's racing to the podium to get the credit for it.
Yep.
Just let's get to behind closed doors, look at the issue, where it is, and who, and as far as the different organizations, would be best to start the initiative, and then we, as a support system, be there.
We got this email from William. It says, I'm a small business owner in South Sacramento area within a mile. I often have to call the sheriff's department in South Sac multiple times a month, and the response time is typically 2 to 5 hours, even when the person that's causing a ruckus at my location has a weapon. How are you going to approach and fix the response times that me and my fellow business owners often see from the sheriff's office?
Yeah, if our boundaries, we have just, I think, shy of 1,000 square miles that the sheriff's office, polices. And there's some areas down in the South Sacramento, all the way down to Brandon Island, Rancho Marietta, that response times can be. So what we're looking at, we haven't done this in a long time, is we're going to do kind of a study as far as analytical, for calls for service. Where do we need to maybe reallocate resources? Do we need to add additional staffing? Because and look at that, because as a commander of South Patrol, that was one of the biggest issues. Is we may have 2 officers in Rancho Marietta, but they got to get down to Brandon Island, down in Isleton.
It's quite a trek.
Exactly. And so that's what we're going to be doing moving forward, is really take a look at a study as far as where are the calls for service, where do we need to put our resources and address those issues, because that is a problem when it takes sometimes 2 hours. I've been, as an officer, I worked South, where I had to go to Brandon Island, and we had an emergency call, and it took me about 40 minutes to get back into South Sacramento while rolling Code 3.
I would imagine, just on a side note, because I had a friend that used to live out in Rancho Marietta, that's a whole other life out there. Yeah. I would have thought they had their own department, honestly. It's
like Disney World.
Yeah. Do they even need it? I mean, it seems very safe.
So, Jim, I'm not sure how everybody views this, but how important is the sheriff? I think a lot of people think, figurehead, elected official, whether it's from a cop standpoint or a citizen standpoint, how important is it whether you're the sheriff or the other guy is?
Well, I think what is important is you take a look at who's going to stand between you and disruption and chaos. Look at what happened downtown where we were in charge of the district attorney's office and the main jail, and we had a different approach than what was happening downtown. People were being allowed to walk around, break windows, spray paint, and sometimes throw a burning object, Molotov cocktail into a building.
God.
We stood in front of those buildings to protect them and said that's not happening. You can protest and peacefully protest. So it's important when you're an elected official, what I've learned, because I really just want to run this organization. I love the people in the sheriff's office. I love this community. But what I've learned through this navigation going to this election is this position has influence, and to utilize it to bring people together and be able to get working towards some of these root issues is exciting for me.
And that example you just gave of the tact that the sheriff's office took downtown, yes. That is something you would decide if, as the sheriff, you would set that tone.
Yeah, I actually ran the teams all downtown, and I remember when the sheriff stood in front of the jail and said, "Hey, we got room here." I give him a hard time. I go, "Yeah, you just picked a fight and you're going home," And I had to go downtown, and I said, it was a scary time down there. But listen to people with anger and passion. It's like, okay, let's get to the table and let's start working through some of these issues and stop yelling at each other.
Because a lot of people know that like police chiefs for cities, they are often beholden to the mayor or someone else. You're independent as the sheriff, especially in Sacramento.
Correct.
You have a lot of authority.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize that it's good to have a stable, effective, admirable head on an arrow. You need somebody at which everybody else falls under, that there's a good standard kept with. And also just to get some perspective, because I don't think a lot of people think about it if you are pushing a cause or you're protesting for something. I don't think that they understand that we need officers there to stop people from making the cause seem violent. And these guys are doing something to let us be able to keep saying what we need to say and talk about what we need to talk about and start the conversations that are important without it being immediately associated with the violent jerks that mess it up for everybody. And so it's thank you for that and for helping keep the message pure in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was never able to wrap my mind around allowing anyone to cause that kind of destruction. And that's not even that's not a peaceful protest. That is like destroying businesses and people that are barely making it and just destroying neighborhoods. And I can understand maybe the anger that someone may have and they don't know how to express it and they find themselves doing that, but it's still not okay.
Yeah.
You need to be stopped. And now, as you said, let's have the conversation to see if we can change that, into a conversation as opposed to destroying buildings and property. Yeah. Of people that are also just trying to get along in life.
Yeah.
We got an email from Chris that says, I got to know Jim at Central at the time he was promoted to captain. He's a great guy, approachable, intelligent, and always courteous. I was glad to see he threw his hat in the ring. I will certainly vote for him.
Oh, nice.
So the election's actually June 7th. Yes. You want to make your closing pitch or your closing plea for votes here?
A shameless plug. No, I think, what I say is fact check me. And fact check my opponent. When you look at voting records, and that is the difference, is I'm a protector, not a politician. And when I look at where my opponent has gone to now, even where he failed to take a vote on the gas tax relief, or he keep the state of emergency for California 2 days before the Super Bowl was happening, that's changed. That means you're voting party line. And that concerns me, that when you're going to be an elected official of a sheriff where you're held accountable to the people, are those influences going to influence him whenever it comes time to actually make tough decisions and what we just discussed? But for me, I'm doing it for the right reasons. You mentioned it earlier. It's not about the title. I'm about leading a movement. And how do we get people together? I've been able to organize community groups to come together and challenge them. Are you willing to stand side by side and link arms with us when you're going to have people who you organize be mad at you because you're working with us? And now I look at it this way: is we're building those relationships, and what we're doing here is something special. And I'm excited to see where we're going to take Sacramento. We're going to take Sacramento to a level it's never seen before. I already have the allied agency partners. I work closely with them. The county, community base, it's there. It's just a matter of once I win this, it's going to be great to watch what happens, because we're going to come together and we're going to be the blueprint for other areas to learn from.
One of the things we talk about on the show a lot is if you're soured or soiled on voting, which I understand, the one place you should always look is local.
Yes.
And if the last 2 years didn't show how important local officials and local elections are, I don't know what will. Because a lot of people, their eyes glaze over or elected a bit, but that's why we really wanted to demonstrate the importance. If you live in Sacramento County and you like what Jim Barnes just said, it matters that you find a way to vote for him.
Yeah, and it's over in June. There's a lot of people thinking, hey, we'll wait to see who the final two are in November. That's not it.
That's
This
not
is
how
over
this
in
works.
34 days.
Right. People think, okay, I'll make a note in November. But whoever wins on June 7th, that's our sheriff.
Yeah.
And when do you become a sheriff if you win on June 7th?
The sheriff will be around to be sworn in. I believe it's in January, or be effective, obviously, at the next year. But yeah, if you like what you're hearing, I say go to JimBarnesForSheriff.com and get on board, because what we're doing is we're leading the movement right now.
How long do you get? Is this elected upon every year? I don't know.
Every 4 years. No, every 4 years.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Every
Like the
4 years.
president. I like it.
I got a quick gotcha question that I just thought of.
Sure.
If you don't win, are you going to stay on?
Well, I will tell you this. My opponent has made his leadership team known, and I will give my playbook to whoever comes, because I feel everything that I've talked about right now is where I need to be. And I'll tell you, like I said, when I stop living for myself and I'm living for a purpose, I believe this is where I'm supposed to be. If you'd have told me as a kid, the way I grew up, in a broken home on welfare, that I'd be sitting here talking to you about running for sheriff, I'd say no way. But I have a saying I teach my daughter and my friends is chase your dreams, change your stars, and go after it. And that's what I'm doing. And if I'm expecting my daughter to do that, then just because of this fear of what's going to be said about me or what's going to be out there, who am I to model? I have to model that. And I'm excited about what we're going to do here in Sacramento. I'm excited about the momentum we're creating and the support I'm getting. I appreciate the absolute, opportunity to be here. And if you like what you're hearing, let's get on board, because we are going to change things around here.
What's the website again?
JimBarnesForSheriff.com.
That seems like it makes sense. Thank you for being here, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And they will stick together, no tonsils.